Welcome to episode 24 of Raiders the Lost Art. My name is Finbar, and this is a conversation with the Starmaker, Kelli Richards. You may have heard of a rock star, a superstar, a sports star, but what about a North Star? So Kelli Richards, in this respect, is the Starmaker. She helps people and organizations connect with their North Star. She helps them to connect to their vision, to their strategy, to capital, to partnerships, and much, much, much more. She helps them see ahead of the curve. Kelli started her time basically back in Los Angeles at record company A&R. And then she moved on from there to work to Silicon Valley to go back and work with Steve Jobs at Apple. In the early days, pioneering the transformation of music and video into the digital platforms. Since then, she's worked with some of the biggest stars in the world, from Paul McCartney to Stewart Copeland to Prince. The list goes on and on and on. She's also works with some of the biggest companies in the world, from Intel and Apple and Microsoft. So I wanted to get Kelli on the show to talk about this concept of a North Star and how people connect with that North Star, and also to chat about some of the good old days back in Silicon Valley and in Los Angeles. So we had a great conversation, and without further ado, hit it. So Kelli, it's so great to see you again. It's been so long since we've caught up. It's a real treat to just see your shining face over there where are you, San Francisco at the moment?
Silicon Valley, Cupertino.
Silicon Valley, there, the good old Silicon Valley. You know, you're one of the only people I know in the world that threads all of these amazing things from the music industry to tech industry in Silicon Valley. And you work globally, and you coach, and you've been, music producer, and you've worked at big labels, and you've worked with some of the most inspirational people of our time. So it's a real honor to not only see you as a friend, but also to have you on the show.
Thanks, Finn. It's so wonderful to see you and be here with you.
Yeah, awesome. So Kelli, Raiders the Lost Art is this show which talks about the intersection of music, creativity, art, technology, sort of trying to create a narrative and have amazing people on that showcase what, some of the things that they do. Now, I in my language, I call you a bit of a star maker, and a realignment igniter. So you sort of have this amazing ability to sort of see between the cracks in a lot of ways. You understand technology, you understand entertainment, you understand engagement. You also understand people. And for me, it's that you're a super connector on one level, but more than just connecting, to me, and again, I'm only speaking for myself here, you can actually somehow delve in and clear out the rubbish tip and all the complexity in people and help them realign towards their source. Is that sort of what
Yeah, it's two sides of a coin, Finn. It's connecting opportunities between people and projects, and as external, and then internally connecting the dots for people within themselves. Maybe showing them possibilities they haven't seen for themselves, opportunities they haven't thought of, and really helping them, as you say, liberate themselves from some old belief systems and mindsets that no longer serve them or maybe never did.
Well, it blows me away, Kel, because obviously we've known each other a long time, and there's a lot of people out there saying that they do this stuff, but you do this, in my view, on another level. And I think, it's this sort of, these different backgrounds that you've brought together, and your experience, in my view, is that sort of catalyst to help you do that. It's sort of an experiential and academically driven sort of process, which gives you that competitive edge.
So. Yeah, it's three dimensions. You could say academic, intellectually, experiential, because I'm just a few steps ahead of the people I'm serving. I've had a little more experience than maybe they have. And then it is allowing for a sense of channeling and intuition of where the spiritual world meets the business and innovation world.
Yeah, it's awesome. So Kel, let's look at, we're at an amazing time in history right now. Like, a lot of people go, oh my God, touch the lockdown and COVID and stuff. But I know you're like me, always looking at the positive. Where's the opportunity? Where are those cracks? How can we, And so I think this is a great conversation. I think it's really relevant to a lot of people who are struggling to find their identity now, who might be coming out of a job or might be coming into the workforce, young people, older people. Everyone's sort of trying to figure out who they are and what their purpose is in life. So I think I'm really, really psyched about where this conversation is going to be. I'm
excited about it too. And especially on that point, I want to lay out a couple of points by the way what you just shared. I look at the gifts of the pandemic, that people slowed down enough to take a closer look inside themselves, what really matters and what doesn't in their life when they actually slow down or forced to slow down. And also that they can work on their own terms, that lifestyle matters. 20 years ago, when I was moving on from Apple and wanting to work with Todd Rungren, I moved to Kauai. I said to myself, well, I've got the internet and the phone. I should be able to work from anywhere in the world. But back then, nobody was willing to let people work remotely. You were effectively written off if you tried to do that. Nowadays, it's encouraged for people to be able to live wherever they choose and work remotely. And that's all because the pandemic opened up that as a possibility that needed to happen.
Yeah, well, as someone who has built video tech that, like with Linneus, for a long time I've had this vision that the video would change the way we communicate, not just from an entertainment perspective. And I think, the pandemic's really allowed people to understand you can do business over a video call.
Well, look at us right now. This is how we operate every day now.
Yeah, this is now the norm. So it's an exciting time.
So again, you were right on with the vision of video being a driver, where other people might have said, oh, yeah, well, we'll get around to it someday.
Well, I think we'll delve into that in this conversation about how you not only see ahead of the curve, but how you make the timing right and get all that stuff into alignment. So yes. Let's go back to the beginning, Kelly. Like, you've beside all these amazing things you've started, where did you start? I know you started did you start in music at EMI, or was that?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, Finn. It started with me being the visionary that you know me to be. Yep. From the age of 8, knowing I wanted to be a record producer. I didn't know what that role was at the time. I had seen video of George Martin behind the Beatles, and I knew that in my mind, he was the magic. He was the missing ingredient that nobody ever gave credit to, because he was the guy in charge, operating the playground, coming up with innovative methods that they didn't understand even existed. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be sort of the inspiration, the wind behind the wings of the people that are actually out front. I want to be the person behind the scenes that helps make the magic happen. But unfortunately, I couldn't get arrested as a woman trying to, come out of college and be a record producer or even a recording engineer. So as fate would have it, I was already a natural networker, and I'd met some people in the industry and wound up detouring to work in what's called A&R at a major record label, which happened to be Capitol EMI, working out of the Capitol Tower building in Hollywood. And that's what I did. I went in sideways and started my career in music first, but having grown up in Cupertino in Silicon Valley, which is the home of Apple headquarters, and having had the privilege of having Steve Jobs as a mentor from when I was in high school at the age of 16, I had a passion for the tech world too, because I knew that innovation would drive change. And so I always had a vision for the blending of both the music and the tech world. And I'd also put myself through college at Guitar Player and Keyboard magazines, which, as fate would have it, were also headquartered in Cupertino.
Well, I love the story I read about you meeting Steve Jobs. Was it in a coffee shop or something when you asked him to mentor you?
Yeah. He was a hippie, and so was my mom. And so we frequented the hippie coffee shops, all the granola crunching natural restaurants in Cupertino, of which there were several in the 70s. And so did Steve. And I knew who he was. He was nothing less than Willy Wonka himself for the company growing up in the backyard. And when I was given this challenge in high school to go find a mentor of a company I admired, there was only one name on my dance card. So I just had the moxie to go up to him and tell him what I was up to and would he be open to being my mentor. And it just kind of worked out from there.
Wow, that's amazing. So once again, you could see ahead of the curve then. You knew exactly who you wanted to be your mentor.
Absolutely.
Right?
I always had a lot of gumption. Lucille Ball and I share the same birthday, and I always did love Lucy. And what I loved about her the most was that she showed that determination and grit and creativity, it would open any door. You just had to work around the perceived obstacles and you'd make it happen. And I just took that into my DNA,
And it's so the fascinating DNA of, having Steve Jobs as your mentor, working at Capitol EMI, keyboard, guitar player, their KBI stuff, but to me, what's interesting is you really grabbed this. You went for it. It wasn't like you sat around going, I'll just ask Steve Jobs and he'll mentor me. It's like you had that determination. You still have that determination now, right?
Yeah, very much so. If there's something I want to make happen, I just go make it happen. I'm an expert creative problem solver. Can't influence people all the time that way, but circumstances can be worked on in that way. People too, to a certain extent, but people have free will.
So Kelly, what about how would you for the audience out there, how would you sort of mentor them on getting past fear of going for things? Because it seems like a lot of people are just, we're brought up in a society where I can't do this and I can't do that, when they can. So how would you help them step through that?
Yeah, that's a big part of what I work through, Finn. People are conditioned to be fearful and not take chances. And there's all these trite phrases about what fear means, false evidence appearing real and all this stuff. But the bottom line is a lot of people have been conditioned to, live a certain life, toe the line, pay the mortgage, don't rock the boat. And that defines happiness. But really it doesn't, because what they've done is they put their personal passions on the shelf, sometimes for decades, sometimes for their whole life. And they live by fear. When if they started to realize that they could shift their belief systems and mindset and liberate themselves, and then remember what it is they really love to do, what their passion truly is, there is a way with some support and permission and encouragement that they can actually come back to themselves and find that path. And that's a lot of what I work on with people as a trusted advisor.
I think what's a little story for everyone who's watching this is many, many years ago, I was a guitar player and I got into computers in the early days when computers were just turning the recording thing. And I really worked with Apple in Australia to get a music store, computers in a music store. And the music store I was part of, we became the first Apple reseller. And I then became this guy called the Masters of Media guy in Australia. And so I would go around studios and stuff. Anyway, years later, I bump into Kelli and I find out that was Kelli's program. So I'm working for this little Apple Australia and I'm the guy helping studios, and that was Kelli's program. So how did you move from capital EMI to Steve Jobs into this role and all that work that you did at Apple?
Well, part of it was friends making recommendations. Part of it was luck. Part of it was timing. Apple was, in fact, the Wonka factory to me growing up in the company town. So I knew at some point I wanted to get in there. I just didn't know when and how.
You had the golden ticket.
That's it. It truly was. And so there I was minding my own business in Los Angeles, working out of the tower. And colleagues said to me, there is this opportunity. And I'd left my fiance at the time up in Cupertino. I'd left my family. And I really didn't like living in Los Angeles. It didn't really fit with my own ethos. And so I was yearning to go back home to Cupertino. And a colleague said, I think you should take a run at starting a music focus at Apple. And so I did. I talked to some of the people that I knew there and worked my way through, like I do from a networking standpoint. And the timing was right in the late 80s for us to start a focus on music and entertainment at the company. So I came back and was part of a very small Skunkworks team that was doing just that. I'd like to say the rest is history, but there were a lot of bumps and bruises, detours along the way. Finally, to come to launching this campaign called Masters of Media, talking about things like cross-media authoring and how to integrate and leverage one set of content in multiple ways. And the vision that we had even then, and this is now in the mid-90s, to disrupt multiple industries, from publishing to television to film to music. This was not an accident that Apple was involved in disrupting these industries. It was by design, because evolution had a role to play and we were at the tip of the spear. Yeah. So that's kind of the backstory on what got me to that point.
Well, so you were fundamental in one of the biggest fundamental changes in the whole music business. Really, you were part of that team that reshaped everything from, like you're talking about iPods and iPhones and iTunes Music Store and Masters of Media in the early days of as analog was going to digital, and you were there.
All of that. Phenomenal. And in the early days, we should pause and connect some of those dots. In the early days, it was about making sure that every musician and filmmaker chose the Macintosh as their creative partner of choice to actually realize their dreams and visions through the power of the computer. And then when we partnered with companies like DigiDesign and Pro Tools, the combination of a Mac with Pro Tools, as you know, then liberated musicians from expensive hours in the studio that they really couldn't afford, that had to be on somebody else's schedule. Now they could just be in their living room doing all that. So yeah, this was the vision. It was absolutely by design, like I said.
And it was an incredible time. I remember I was a product specialist also in a country for a product called Logic, which wasn't owned by
Right.
Apple. It was owned by a guy called Dr. Gerhard Lengling in Rellingen, just outside of Hamburg, and he had a company called eMagic. And
Yes.
I still remember I was this Logic guy, and then all of a sudden I find that, hang on a second, we get the notification through eMagic that it's being sold to Apple. It was it was such an amazing turn. Now everyone just knows it as Apple Logic, but it was a great point in history, I think, a great point in time. I was so happy to be part of it, and it was amazing catching up with you later, and then us going, oh my God, we've got this connection through Apple,
It's a very small industry for those of us that have been at it from day one, which at this point is pushing, I hate to say it, 35, 37 years.
Yeah, I know. Well, you still look amazing. So, we're some of the lucky ones in the music industry that somehow survived. So.
And if I might say, on our own terms to a certain extent.
Yeah, well.
Because when the powers that be were getting too political at Apple and it was squeezing the life out of me during that terribly painful time when the company was a quarter away from dying, literally. And I kept running the halls saying there's only one person that can save this company. And they would all push back at me and say, he's not coming back to Apple. He's running 2 other companies. Are you crazy? And I said, no. He has to come back. It's mythology. It's his company to kill or keep. And thank God he turned the company around.
Yeah, well, he certainly did that,
But I was a casualty because the management had zero foresight and was actually toxic. The people I was working with were actually toxic. And I couldn't survive waiting and hoping that he would come back and turn everything around. I was there when he did come back. But then, as I say, the company was a quarter away from dying. And had he not gotten a loan from Bill Gates at Microsoft at the time, that's what saved the company and turned it around and bought him the time he needed.
Well, on that too, Kel, there's a lot of people who may watch this in the future who are coming out of a career or a corporate job and through whatever reason, especially with COVID or something, that's disappeared. And that's a big wake-up call, right? Like you've got this great career, you're part of changing the world, there's this digital transformation, you're building programs around the world, and something completely outside your control happens, and all of a sudden the environments go from amazing to toxic and you can't stay.
Correct.
Well, one of the great credits to you, Kel, is that, you went on from that with your tenacity, and you've worked with Cisco, Intel, Prince, Stewart Copeland, obviously Todd Rungren. You took those skills and that tenacity and the artists and a bunch of other people. I'm just sort of raving on just a couple, but how did you go? What was that? Do you still remember that moment where that pain helped you manifest this next part of your career?
Yeah, and I got a lot of support and guidance from some of my colleagues at Apple and beyond at the time too. And remember, I was already working with Todd when I made that transition. Sure. We had come up with this shared vision for what we called Patronet at the time, right, which was the vision where artists could go direct to their fans and be underwritten versus being beholden to a record label.
Yeah.
And if they were big enough artists with a big enough fan base, the theory being they could be underwritten, as I say, and that would take care of their financial needs. The problem was we were too far ahead of the curve in that vision. Now, years later comes Patreon. Note the similarity to the name. Yeah. A company at one point last year worth $4 billion. So we had the right vision, but the wrong market timing by a lot. Because I'm talking mid-90s at this point, mid to late 90s.
Yep.
So, it doesn't do any good to be a visionary in that sense, because if you're too far ahead of market timing, it doesn't matter. You're just birdcage liner.
Well, I've experienced that myself in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I know you have. It's the curse of the visionary. I call it the curse of the visionary.
Well, yeah, but I've sort of learned to, you've got to put pragmatism and process behind that vision and understand pulling in the data from different places to actually work out the timing. So it's been an interesting lesson for me, but one thankfully has paid off through a bit of tenacity myself. But
indeed. I'm not sure I answered your question fully. I mean, the other part about just going it alone, starting my own business at that point, was that there really wasn't a choice for me. I was tired of politics and bureaucracy, and I had enough confidence in myself and in my network that people would hire me to consult to them, and I would figure this out as I went. I won't say there weren't times when I was pretty scared, because I was. and times when I wasn't sure where the money was coming from and gaps in cash flows. But somehow, now it's been 25 years, close to it, on my own. I've made it work.
So tell me, Kelli, about working with someone like Prince, right, who's very private, very guarded.
To be sure.
Well, at least that's the stories I hear from friends.
No, very true. And also didn't trust anybody.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So it's that. Yeah. How did you get through that? How did you get that level of trust with someone?
Well, you know, again, the way I built those relationships with a lot of those forward-thinking, tech-savvy artists was through my time at Apple. And so I already started to build those relationships where the trust had started to build.
Right.
And he and the others knew they could trust my vision. They could trust my ethics, my ethos. They just learned that I was in it for them. I was in their corner. And also they learned that I would hold confidences, which was critical. I talk story about them to anyone. And so when I left Apple, one of my first clients as a consultant was Napster. Right. And Prince knew that. We talked about it. He would come. He saw me as sort of a tech advisor to him. Right. About what was coming in the tech world, what should he take seriously, what should he ignore, all of that. And so he knew that I was working with Napster, and he was upset that his songs were showing up on Napster and people weren't paying for them. So he asked me to facilitate a call with the CEO at one point, who happened to be Hank Berry. And I did get Hank on the phone, remains a longtime colleague to this day. And we both educated Prince that, yeah, we could take the songs down, but people would put them up again instantly. It was going to be like whack-a-mole. So instead of fighting the fans like Lars Ulrich and Metallica chose to do, Hank came up with the notion of doing a special promotion to promote Prince's current project to the 70 million Napster users and turn it around. So it wouldn't be that they were taking from him. He was now giving them something and there would be value exchanged.
Wow. And the different types of personalities you work with, like I know you introduced me to Stewart Copeland through their Project Peace on Earth thing, and he is so much fun, that guy, and so smart.
Oh my God, yes.
So, absolutely just the different personalities of being there with these people and one of the things that I really wanted to ask you about, which sort of a little bit selfishly, is that, there was a case study of you working with someone who had run an exit and sort of lost their mojo, basically, and you helped them get that find that spark again. As I find it really interesting that when I went through my exit on Linneus, it was sort of a big struggle for me of going, well, what now? Like my identity's been lined up in this business for a long time. Is there a process you work with? Is it just listening and just using experience, or is it?
No, there's no like 10-step process and here's what it is. There's that. It's that I went through that myself when I left Apple and struggled with that loss of identity that could open any door. Right. That was the calling card. So, it's just that I had been there, and I am a very good listener, and I'm very good at intuiting what's going on and seeing inside people at a deeper level perhaps than they can understand themselves, like I said earlier, and helping them sort of find some hope and a path to where they say they want to go. And if they don't know where they want to go, we figure it out. I pick up clues, we weave a tapestry together, and we get them on their path. Right. It's just because I've been doing it for a long time, and it's what I've been trained to do, and it's what I've evolved my own process to that enables me to do that with people. And just like I was working with these brilliant, tech-savvy, progressive-thinking artists, it's the same thing with anybody I work with.
Sure.
It's just me aligning with who they are at their core, and then at the issues the best I can from inside their purview and their lens, but then bringing my lenses along for the ride externally that can help show and create sort of this multidimensional synthesis, if you like.
Yeah, there's a thing that I talk about, and it's actually that one of the headings of the actual Raiders of the Lost Art series, and it's something I try and promote a lot, which is called active listening, which is not just listening, but going deep into understanding the listening and critically thinking around what the data points are. And obviously, you're very, very good at that. But the other thing that I think you're really obviously good at is, besides working with people, you work with companies, big companies, some of the biggest in the world. And so, it's to me, it's fascinating. You've got this sort of personal mentorship. You also work with some of these major companies, like I was reading the case study with Jerry Seinfeld and Intel. And, so you've got this really
It
interesting
was a
sort of.
Cisco appearance, but yeah.
So-
No, it's both, Finn. It's that I have been working as sort of a strategist and biz dev super-connector for companies as a consultant and continue to do that in parallel to this trusted advisor role one-on-one with people that are high achievers looking at what's next in their work and their life.
So how do you boil that down to a description, Kelly? What do you call yourself?
Well, it isn't a simple description.
Yeah, I could imagine.
The functions are actually kind of similar,
Right.
in that I see opportunities, I see strategies, I see how to solve creative challenges. I do have relationships to plug both into decision makers at companies as well as the individuals I'm working with. I have the network at my disposal to offer to both of them. But it's really how each can hear what I do for them. So in the corporate world, they understand a little better what consultants do. And then that it comes along with that comes my advisor role to the senior management.
You seem to be a bit of an amplifier of vision, an amplifier of direction, or
It is. It's a strategist role. And then on the individual side, they get that they can't trust a lot of people. And so the notion of having a trusted advisor, a thought partner, a confidant makes sense to them. But I don't call it coaching because anybody and their brother can hang a shingle and call themselves a coach. Even though I went through the training to get certified as a coach from 2 different institutions, nobody cares about that. Nobody ever asks about that.
Sure.
But that's why I call myself.
Ask about it. You got certified from 2 different institutions around coaching.
Yeah, so I do come by it honestly. But I call myself a trusted advisor because I want to set myself apart and really appeal to those high achievers that have had a fair amount of success, and trust is a real issue for a lot of them.
Right. That's awesome. So, Kel, if I was to ask the 18-year-old version of Kelly, what would be your number one tip for this venture into life? What would be your number one sort of tip?
Well, I would have said, yes, you can achieve what you envision for yourself, but it might be a circuitous journey. It won't be a straight path.
Right.
And you have to be willing to let the detours happen and follow the river, flow with it. And I also would have said, honor your intuition and trust yourself and your guidance, because it will never steer you wrong. It's only when you ignore it that you can find yourself in serious trouble. For example, as you know this story, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 as we're doing this interview, this conversation. And you know that when I was going to be a producer at one of Michael Jackson's biggest events, honoring his career, 2 nights at Madison Square Garden, they happened a couple of nights prior to 9/11. One happened on 9/9, one happened on 9/8, the other one on 9/10, 20 years ago. Mm. And I was booked on the flight on 9/11, United Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco, that wound up crashing over Pennsylvania.
I didn't know that.
I'm sure you knew this. I'm sure we talked about it.
Oh, we've got so many stories that just amazing. So many great.
How did I get off that flight? Sheer intuition. I had a very strong feeling. Do not go to New York. Do not go to New York. And I had to fight with myself because this was going to be a highlight of my career, to be a producer on this big Michael Jackson event. And in the end, I honored my intuition and did not go. And it saved my life. And I'm here 20 years later to tell you the story as a result.
Well, Kelly, it's I hope that this is your wisdom is shining through. It's people often ask me about how do you do this and how do you do that, and a lot of it has got to do with the people in my life, amazing people such as yourself, and I really, really value your friendship and your input on my show, and you're an amazing person and you're a big inspiration to a lot of people. And where can people find out about you, Kel?
Thank you for all that, Finn. I deeply appreciate our friendship as well. It's really simple. It's just my name is my website. And really, I designed that website as a lighthouse for the people I'm meant to work with. So go to kellyrichards.com, Kelly with an I, Richards with an S, And hopefully you'll fall into a gravity well of lots of good information that resonates. And if that makes sense, then reach out and we'll have a conversation for possibilities.
Fantastic. Well, Kel, it's been great seeing you again. I miss you. I look forward to seeing you when somewhere in the world when we catch up again post this craziness and sharing some more stories and more fun.
Pleasure's mine. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Bye. See you, Kel.
All right, Finn.